This is a used car headliners. I've always wanted to do, I don't know if I can commit this to daily, but some kind of daily headliners or weekly or something like that. Taking some headlines that are being shared about the used car automotive world and kind of give my insights or views of it. And so I wanted to do kind of the first one today. Figured, there's a headline, and then in cars, there's headliners. Thought it was a good little mix here. But I wanted to go over a article that was released by Auto Remarketing. It was done on, I believe, Friday, the October 25th. So I'm going to do is share my screen. Obviously, if you're listening to this on podcast, it might be good to watch it online in YouTube. But if not, no big deal. I'll go through what we're seeing here. So again, this is Auto Remarketing. This was done on Friday, October 25th. J.D. Power sees October being a complicated for used car retail and new lease markets. Now, I took a little screenshot of this. I'll blow it up, and I kind of highlighted some areas. I know there's going over to the depreciation of vehicles that are going on right now, but part of the article is saying about the J.D. Power determined the number of leases set to expire this month is down 10.7% compared to September and 35.4% lower than October of last year. So obviously there's less lease returns. Now, I wouldn't say, again, there was a shortage of vehicles. I'll get into that here in a minute. Obviously we fell down from 17 million or close to 17 million down to 15 millions, but we obviously sold, I've covered this. We sold way more cars than we did through the recession and everything else. But anyways, down here it says November traditionally marks the beginning of holiday sales event season for the automotive industry. This period often sees focus on premium vehicles accompanied by manufacturer backed lease incentives and price discounts. As a number of leases expire in November, December is projected to be nearly 40% lower than the same period a year ago. The holiday season may require innovative strategies and entice customers to acquire new vehicles, he said. So that's the headline. That's kind of part of that article. But, a couple things that I wanted to share about that is kind of some of this insight. Now, obviously, I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you some data. But obviously, I believe if anybody's going to be going into a new vehicle toward the end of the year, it's going to be probably toward a new car for incentives like rebates, not only the rebates, but I think the lower interest rates. I think the rebates are going to be the biggest aspect because of the fact that they can absorb negative equity. Now, if you got somebody in decent negative equity, the average is over actually, I think it was $6,000 last time I shared it. But there's people 10, 15 grand upside down. But if you have a decent negative equity, 1, 2, 3 grand, maybe 4 tops, you might be able to roll that into a nice lease incentive. Maybe have a little bit of payment out of line, but in 3-4 years, whatever the lease term you decide to use, mostly it's going to be a 3-year lease. That'll kind of break even, get out of that car. So that is something to think about. I think as the end of the model year stuff happens, we'll get more new cars. New cars lead to more trade-ins. And, here's why. It's not so much, again, there's a shortage of cars. There's not like this big magnet that still start pulling cars out of the world here, or the country. Because if you look here, and this is U.S. registration, U.S. vehicle registrations. And here's the numbers, really. And you can kind of see it a little bit on this graph over here, but that graph only goes to 2022. So what they did, if you go back 10 years to over 10 years, 2012, there was 248 million, almost 249 million used cars on the road. Well, I mean used cars. These are registered cars, so obviously they're used. And if you look, 2022, 290.8 million, so almost 291. And they estimate 292 and projecting 2024 to have 296.6 million registered cars. So if you do the math there, that's almost 50 million more cars registered in the United States. So again, no shortage of vehicles. They're just in the wrong hands. They're not in the used car market. Why? Well, if you look here, another chart is the average age of cars is 12.6 years. Now, you got to remember this, because I remember having a conversation with somebody. They were thinking people keeping these cars for 12.6 years. this is the average age of a car on the road. It could be on its second owner, third owner, fourth owner, fifth owner, right? But the cars on average are 12.6 years old. Now, a couple of reasons for that, not just economic, but just features and stuff. Cars are pretty well equipped nowadays. Power windows, locks, sunroofs, navs, now Apple CarPlay. There's not a whole lot of, newer cars have newer adages like lane assist and so forth. But people, for most part, you look at a 10-year-old car, it barely looks 10 years old. When I grew up, you could tell a 10-year-old car from a 10-year-old car. Some of them didn't have power windows and locks and all that kind of stuff. So not only economic reasons, I think it also is expense reasons. Obviously, cars are more expensive, so these people are holding on to them longer. And if you look at just passenger cars, it's up to 14 years by 2024 here this year, 12.6 for combined, and trucks are actually, I was surprised. Trucks are at 11.9 or 12 years. I would have thought people will hang on to their trucks a little bit longer, but I guess some of them get worked out pretty good. But this is the reason why there's, people are holding on to these cars, but yet there's more registered cars in the United States. Now, per capita and everything else, you got to look at that. But there's no shortage of cars. Now, there's going to be a shortage of lease returns because if you think about it, during the COVID period, 2020, 2021 was the peak, 2022 a little bit. There wasn't a lot of lease incentives going out there right now. There was no residuals. Cars were appreciating. It was hard for banks to roll any kind of residual values out there to calculate these lease payments. And so the lease returns are going to be less. And so as customers hang on to these cars, it's going to be tougher to get out of their hands. So my point being with this headline or headliners is the fact that private party acquisition, service drive acquisition is going to be huge because all these people have to service these cars. So hopefully if you've done a good job, they're coming back to your service lane. And from there, appraising every service opportunity. We just did our Lot Pop 20 group this month, a few weeks ago at the beginning of the month here in October. And that was one of our biggest focal points of that 20 group was talking about that acquisitions. We had Frank Knox coming in and David Spizak and, talking about always be appraising. When you appraise, sales will come. Think about it. Why do you appraise a car? Not to hold on to it. You appraise a car to buy it and either wholesale it or retail it for a profit. So if you appraise more cars, you take in more cars. That means more sales, either retail, wholesale. So, and again, that was something that David Spizak talked about. And, the strategies of appraising every car that comes in through the service lane. There's some caveats there. Obviously, you don't want to appraise a car that you just sold 3 months ago to somebody, unless they bought it from a competitor and maybe it kind of looks like you can, set them up a bit. But service drive acquisition is going to be huge. Private party acquisition is going to be huge because these people are holding on to these cars tighter and longer. And so to be able to go to them and, again, maybe show them and point out maybe the new features they don't have on their 5 or 8 year old car and what they could do. And those upgrades are worth that, maybe a little extra payment if it's going to cost those customers more money. But again, so is this one of those headlines? We talk about shortage. I would say, well, there's never been more cars registered in the United States but people are holding them on longer. Yes, we sold less new cars over that COVID period. I helped dealers through the recession, who kind of reminded me through that. But through that COVID period, we did have a dip in new car sales, right? But those cars were moving, and there's plenty of cars that got sold. It's just they're not in lease returns where they're coming back, and that makes a used car manager a little bit edgy, thinking they can hold out on the cars that they have. The other thing I'd like to highlight, and I guess we could show that now too, real quick, because you talk about shortage, and I mentioned the fact of, per capita, here's the thing. If you look at a 5-year window, we're looking at about a 10 or 12-year window of inventory registered cars. But if you look at a 5-year window, if you go back 5 years ago, 2019, on a scale of 100, the used car shopper index was at 60. Where are we right now? 45. Okay. Where was it at this time in 2020? We got to go back again to October, somewhere around here. 69. Again, we're at 45. Where were we in 2021 around this time? 68. Again, we're at 45. That's a 13% drop off. So you go into October of 2022, 51. Again, we're at 45. October of 2023, Okay, we're looking at 51. Again, we're at 45. So it's funny. We had this little uptick in shopper index, and our dealers had about a 4% increase in overall volume. They were selling, instead of like 44, 46% of their inventory in 2 weeks, they're selling 46 or 48%. So that little uptick happened. But again, it's down at 45. So even if there's 10 or 15% less inventory or availability of cars, there's also 10 or 15% less shopper activity. So it's kind of a break even when you look at that. So don't get tied up in this shortage of vehicles. Check out my other videos. I did cover what the hurricane's going to do to the wholesale market. It's going to drive it up as dealerships and people are going to go replace cars in those hurricane markets. Dealers, for example, are going to go to the auction in Kansas City and buy cars and drive up wholesale values to get those replaced in those hurricane towns. But that's going to be a quick turnaround. First thing people are going to get is food, transportation. So people are going to buy those cars, going to drive wholesale up a bit. But again, the people here in Kansas don't need to buy a car. So the profit margin, you're going to have to still be competitive. So don't hold and hope that there's some shortage of cars and you got to hold out and force people to pay what you want them to pay because there's a shortage. You just got to understand how that shortage is impacting and why wholesale is going up. And it's not for the benefit of we get to demand more cars because there's less cars in the market. There might be some, again, less cars available on the retail market, but there's plenty of cars are out there because people are holding on to them. They're not interested in trading them in. It's just a different market right now, and it will be for a little bit. So help you stay on the toes and stay ahead of this, you need to look internally at what's really happening on your lot. That's where Lot Pop can come in with our Lot Walk software and our weekly calls to keep you ahead of this. If you'd like to check that out, just go to lotwalk.com, sign up for a demo. We'll walk through exactly how we help you stay ahead of this by looking both at leads and CRM lead data and inventory data all combined. If you got a truck problem, it's a truck attack your trucks, but not only attack your trucks and figuring out adjustments, but work the leads on trucks. And we'll be able to help you isolate that. If you like, lotpop.com or lotwalk.com to check that out. I like this headliners. I'll try to keep this up as often as possible. I will do a market update tomorrow or Wednesday to give you some insights on what we see happening in the market right now, other than just the shopper count. Hope this was helpful.